Well, welcome back to another episode of the Addy Hour podcast. It's been quite a while since we've released a new episode, so I'm really excited to be back in this seat, so to speak, and to be hosting and facilitating these conversations. And I'm grateful to you all for tapping into these conversations as well. So today we're going to be having a conversation around cannabis, opioids, mental health, and community. So a lot of hot button topics there, a lot of topics that are important for how we're continuing to navigate as a society. I'm grateful I have two esteemed guests here today who are going to help us think through and navigate through these topics. So let me go ahead and introduce the two guests. The first guest, Dr. Paul Glaser, is someone that I actually got connected to a few years ago when I was participating in some mental health events and initiatives in St. Louis, Missouri. And just talking with Dr. Glaser, I could really sense that he was someone who was doing a lot of transformative work. But the thing that really stood out to me is this someone who I feel has a real gift for connecting with people in an authentic way. And it's something that was very clear to me in how he navigates and how he is thriving in his work, both in the community and in his research as well. So just to give you all a little bit of background, Dr. Paul Glaser obtained his MD and PhD at Washington University in St. Louis. And during that time, he focused his research on neuroscience and biochemistry. After that, he actually went on to the University of Kentucky, and I have to pause here because this is something that I definitely need to highlight. He did a triple board program, so triple board certified, so we definitely need to give him his flowers for that, but certified in pediatrics, adult psychiatry, and child psychiatry. While he was at Kentucky, he also conducted translational research, specifically in substance use and substance abuse and ADHD, but he also did clinical trials as well. But 11 years ago, he returned to WashU in St. Louis as a full professor, and he's there currently where he teaches residents and fellows. He also conducts research, and he serves as a psychiatric director for the Teen Substance Use Program at Preferred Family Healthcare. And in that role, he specifically provides psychiatric and addiction medicine care to 9 residential and outpatient sites across Missouri. So he's someone who's deeply invested in his work, who's definitely busy about that work and making an impact. Dr. Paul Glaser, thank you so much for joining us on the Addy Hour podcast.
Thank you, Dr. D.
Of course. The next guest who I'd like to introduce is someone who I've also known for a number of years, who's here with me in the studio. That is Dr. Chyrell Bellamy. And we've actually highlighted some of Dr. Bellamy's work in this podcast in the past, specifically the work that she has been doing in church communities around addiction services. So today we might hear a little bit about that, but we're also going to hear a broader scope of the work that she does. Dr. Bellamy is someone whose research and practice examines sociocultural experiences and pathways to wellness and recovery and the prevention and treatment of mental illness and addictions. So definitely important topics. She does that through peer support effectiveness, through organization and leadership transformation, through lived experience leadership, and through community-based participatory research, co-designing methods with those in the community. So I do have to say, Dr. Bellamy, I don't think I've ever met someone who has more roles and more titles as Dr. Bellamy does. Just to give you all a sense of that, she's a professor here at the Yale School of Medicine. She's also the director of the Yale Program for Recovery and Community Health and the associate director of educational programs and interim director for community engaged research at the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation. In addition, she's the director of peer support services and research and director of the Lived Experience Transformational Leadership Academy, or Let's Lead. And as if that wasn't enough, she's also a senior policy advisor for the Office of the Commissioner for the State of Connecticut Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. So again, someone else who's also very busy about their work and making a huge impact. But one thing I really appreciate about Dr. Bellamy is she's someone who openly identifies as a person with lived and living experience of multiple marginalized and minoritized identities, including mental illness, trauma, and addiction. And I know just from engaging with her that that's something that really informs everything that she does. So as you all can hear from these two guests, you all are in for a treat as we navigate through these topics based on their lived experience, based on their expertise, and based on their impact in the community. So welcome, Dr. Bellamy, to the Addy Hour podcast.
Thank you, Dr. D.
Excellent. So as you all know, this is the early part of 2026. There's a lot happening in the world. There's a lot happening in our country. There's a lot that's happening in your personal lives as well. And so even with all the work that you all are doing, I think it's always good for our listeners to be able to remember and in a way to humanize the fact that you all are just navigating and seeking to thrive like many of us are trying to do as well. So I always like to start out with a check-in question just to see how you all are doing overall. Dr. Bellamy, maybe we'll start with you.
That's always a very interesting question. And the first thing that comes to my mind when people ask me that is to really try to come from a place of honesty, right? And so I guess in a very simple way, I will say that I'm actually feeling blessed, right? I feel blessed that I'm able to just be here with you all today, and have this honor to talk about the work, to talk about the work we're doing with community, and I really try to focus on some of the things that get me jazzed up about life. Otherwise, these days it's really hard, given all that's happening, and really trying to make sure that people in the community are getting the resources that they need during these times. So the more I'm able to do that, and I just celebrate these moments. So thank you.
Of course. Appreciate that healthy perspective as well, with both of those pieces and to be able to move forward. And I would imagine that also keeps you effective in the work that you're doing as well, to be able to keep that perspective.
Yeah, yeah. If not, then I definitely will lose sight of my why, right? So, and it's something that I think in our team over at the Program for Recovery in Community Health and I work in Imani, which is that to really hold on to our why in this work. Because if not, you can lose sight of that and then lose sight of your perspective around the work. So,
Really well said. Dr. Glaser, what about you?
Well, I think the most grounding observation of 2026 for me is that child and teenage mental health is still just as much as a crisis as it was 4 years ago, as it was 8 years ago, as it was 12 years ago. It's just been slowly going up niche by niche every year. Sure, some administrations or COVID gives us little blips, but the need is great. The number of practitioners in both the medical and rehab fields is not enough. So there's that reality, that shortage is always there with us. As a institution, WashU's been very flexible and just been really open up to all of us about finding as much funding as we can from the sources that give funding. So that diversity of funding has really helped our program stay afloat. Not without a lot of worries, but I've been in research for 30 years. In every researcher I've worked with or been myself, those worries are always there. So you just have to be resilient and count your blessings, as Dr. Chyrell says.
Yeah, really well said. I mean, so many pieces that you all already bringing out, but just the importance of being able to have that resilience and that encouragement to continue and do the work is what I think is so important. And you've both actually alluded to this already, but I want to dig in a little bit into the why as well. Because when people hear about the amount of work that you're doing, I think it's encouraging to people. I think some people also probably find it overwhelming. And so I'm sure there's some curiosity about, we'll talk about the how also. How do you actually maintain that level of work? But what is it that actually got you to this place? What's the why that drives you on a day-to-day basis? Chyrell, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, it's very interesting. I actually never thought that I was going to be doing research in the area of substance use or mental health. I went back to graduate school to study HIV, and definitely HIV, all of those areas are related. But it wasn't my plan to walk this particular path.
Okay.
So even being here at Yale, January 2006, it's 20 years since I, walked into Yale. So, it certainly wasn't the plan. I think a big part of my why is related to my own, lived experience, as well as seeing the devastation of substance use and mental health, actually, particularly during the HIV crisis, right? I often lead with a poem that's very short that was written by my friend and colleague, Imani Harrington, who is a playwright. She and I co-wrote a book of plays and monologues called Positive Negative Women of Color and then HIV and AIDS. And Imani's poem is, "We need you, our brothers, our sisters, our people. Help us to reaffirm ourselves and loving ourselves. Hold us when we can't stand, 'cause soles of shoes have traveled on our backs for so long. We need you, our brothers, our sisters, our people." And for me, whenever I always lead with that poem because I think it's really important that I show up and I'm reminded that a big part of the work is indeed in helping the community and individuals to reaffirm that love that, that they lost or can't get in touch with, that they have for themselves. But also when we're talking to providers, we're talking to people who are doing this work day in and day out, to also help them hold tight in doing this work and affirm themselves in doing this work. Because as we know in this field, as Dr. Glaser was just alluding to, not only do we lack resources, but there's also a huge turnover, particularly of our day-to-day frontline workers. So
yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that poem sounds so grounding too, and just even again the juxtaposition within the poem of the realities of what's happened to people having their backs walked over, but then also the importance of the community. And it seems like that really can ground and shape things. Just to press in a little bit, I'm curious because you mentioned that this wasn't your intention going into the work. What were some of the things that facilitated that shift? Or maybe it wasn't, I don't know if it was a gradual shift, if it was immediate, you all of a sudden felt that you were called to this, or if it just felt like it happened over time.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is I do feel, as my mother would say, who's a reverend in South Carolina, she would say that I was called to ministry and that my work itself is part of that sort of ministry. And so, I have done work in Zambia, working with people with leprosy as on a repatriation project, returning them to their communities. I was just there for the summer, but that experience itself is very similar to, I think, the work that I'm doing now, which is a sense of helping people reconnect back to their communities that were stripped from them in a sense because of the stigma and shame of illness. It's the same, whether it's HIV, whether it's mental illness, whether it's substance use. It's that stripping away that many experience, which causes this what people often call like this back and forth, through rehab and those sorts of treatment places. But a lot of that is that the community doesn't really know how to embrace people as they're returning after these experiences.
Wow, that's very powerful. It sounds like there's so many areas as I'm hearing you talk that it seems like you're cognizant of and really being intentional to make sure that people are, again, integrated well, that there's receptivity there, that people are empowered, fighting against the stigma. So yeah, really appreciate that. Dr. Glaser, what about you for your why? I mean, you've already alluded to some of the challenges about doing the work that you do with teens around funding and resources. You mentioned some of the ways that the university has been supporting you in that. But what's the why that got you into this work and keeps you in this work?
Yeah, I would say early on it started with kind of taking the best of what my mom and my dad had to give me. My mom was a very compassionate nurse who loved her patients. I always remember very vividly as a child, she said, "I would have been a doctor, but I was told I was not allowed to be a doctor. I had to go and be a nurse." So I think in some ways my career is fulfilling in part her desire to be a doctor. So it already was something I'm not doing for myself. I'm doing for someone else. My dad was a very analytical engineer who hated going to the hospital, but he was kind of the PhD side of me. And very early on, I had this gift for not only translational work, where you would translate very difficult scientific concepts to people who weren't studying that. I could do that. Or psychiatric concepts to pediatricians who are normally not equipped to do that. But also very early on, I just had a gift for speaking into or pouring into the lives of people without a voice or people who are disadvantaged. I remember very distinctly being at the high school cafeteria and being comfortable talking to, the kids that usually got bullied, but were doing great things in their car tech. And I just don't know why that was. It was just there. And then similarly, throughout my early career, I had a lot of mentors who told me how there was a desperate need for more scientists in the psychiatry field, especially child psychiatry. I wasn't even thinking of any adult psychiatry, but when I was in my third year medical school rotation at a big state hospital in St. Louis called Malcolm Bliss, a Black nurse came up to me and she said, "You have a gift for talking to these patients. Please go into psychiatry." When you're a young white dude and a compassionate nurse comes up, it really grabs your attention. And so I had multiple of those experiences. And then as it's gone along, of course, it's just become more of it's melded into the desire to reduce mental health stigma, to be able to talk to people of all races and cultures about where they're at with mental health and get them to the next step. And of course, I think what keeps me going on the journey is, I work at a secular university, so I can't tell you too much, but, I have my higher power. And that really does teach me that, life is going to be all suffering, but it's not about you. You use your skills to help the people without a voice, the disenfranchised. And teaching is part of that as well for me, because I want to teach those people who are from all those other backgrounds, so we can have experts in many ways. So yeah, that's kind of what motivates me to this day, is the teaching aspect as well.
That's great. I mean, just such a healthy perspective that both of you bring as well. And again, I think that authenticity just is so evident for both of you too, because of, as you mentioned, there's stigma, there's challenges, and these aren't necessarily easy areas to navigate, especially if you walk into certain spaces with the wrong attitude, with the wrong unintentional pretensions, and how people might react to that, and how important it is to kind of build that, psychological trust in a way as well. And clearly both of you have done that. And you both mentioned stigma multiple times as well. So we will get to the kind of this cannabis and opioids topic too, but I'm also just thinking about what you see as effective ways to actually navigate through stigma. Obviously, it can show up in a lot of different ways. Chyrell, you've already mentioned kind of the many illnesses where you see it show up, but what have you found to be helpful, either for the people who are receiving the stigma or the people who are either intentionally or unintentionally perpetrating it?
Yeah, well, I have a joint PhD in social work and social psychology, so stigma is definitely an area of interest. I would say that as one thing that they talk about is the contact hypothesis, right? So being in contact, and I would say being in connection with people is really key to learning other things about people besides just what you might see, so to speak. So I will also say, for me, that as a person that identifies as a person with lived experience, that I share that in everything I do. So just as well as I introduce myself as a professor at Yale, I am always sure to mention that I also identify as a person with lived experience, and why that's integral to my life and my work, and my ability to just stand here today, right? So, because there was a time that I actually didn't think I would live, after a certain year. I never thought I would be living after the age of 33, sort of kind of like Jesus, died at 33. I was like, am I going to be that way? So when you asked me earlier, I honestly am very thankful each day because of that, and I think it's a joy and a blessing to be able to stand up and tell others about that. You would be surprised at how many people contact me to talk about their lived experience and talk about the stigma that they experience. If I can share just a quick story, when I was a student at the University of Michigan, I did a I was asked to be in a video that was shown in the huge downtown Michigan movie theater in Ann Arbor, and it featured students, graduate students, as well as professors talking about their experiences with depression. And so it followed me around campus, and I also appeared in the Michigan newspaper as a result. So one of my professors told a colleague of mine, her career is ruined. And immediately I said, no, it's just starting, actually, because the fact that so many people emailed me to say what you did is so important to me. Like, they then asked for resources, for therapists, for places they can go to seek, assistance. And that really meant more to me. I saw that person a few years later
really?
when I was at Yale. It was at a NIDA event in D.C. And it was good to see that person and let them know that I did land well and that I landed at Yale. I do understand, though, that that person wasn't really, I could take it that, oh my God, this person is stigmatizing. And if I took it a certain way, it could have pulled me back and made me not want to talk about it. But instead, I thought about, this person came through life at a particular point in time and where you should not be talking about these things. And actually, still today, it can ruin your career if you don't have the right supports in place, because there still is a lot of stigmatization related to, substance use, mental health issues, as well as other people that have other chronic illnesses in the workplace. So we have so far to go.
Yeah, very true. And yet, people like you have been able to make some inroads in that as well.
Yes.
Because that was even one question I had, how people reacted in that story, I think really beautifully illustrated that. But I'm also impressed that you were able to hold your ground in a sense. But I guess all the encouragement you heard from people was enough to kind of push you to that place. Because I think, it's still there. And that's come up in different conversations we've had here as well. At one point we had Patrick Kennedy on this podcast, just talking about all the things that he saw when he was still an active politician, all things that were happening behind closed doors. And again, even though the stigma has decreased in some ways, there were so many people that he talked to that were navigating through things in their families that they didn't want anybody to know about, because people would then judge them and think, well, they're not credible, or not they weren't credible, they weren't equipped to do the work. So
Exactly.
There's still so much way to go in that way. Yeah. Dr. Glaser, maybe to shift gears and think about this teen aspect that you do a lot of work, as you work a lot with a lot of teens and young people, just how you've seen that stigma show up in a lot of ways, and even the ways you've tried to address that. I know when we were in conversation years back, you did share one of your nicknames the teens had given you, which I believe, if I remember correctly, the OG Dr. G. So I'm curious how you got to that place and how that ties in to building these bridges in a sense.
Yeah, I think part of addressing stigma amongst teens is just getting their ear in the first place. So I do use a lot of motivational interviewing techniques, which just develop rapport. And my main goal is to learn from them, learn what life is like, learn what their special words and meanings are, and maybe what's the favorite vapes that are going around that time, who are their favorite St. Louis rappers, and just build that bond first. Once that is there, we want to find out, what do they feel about their mental health. Some of my patients, were inner city North St. Louis, and, 3 of their closest friends have been shot right in front of them, and they shot at other people. And, the culture, depending on which group they're in, the culture is to be tough and move on. And marijuana is kind of their perfect medicine because it helps them do that. The problem is, as soon as they stop smoking, all the trauma comes right back, unprocessed, perhaps even worse than before they started. So helping them make that transition takes a big team of people who are ready to, work with their stigmas and slowly break them down one by one. And I think that's they've taught me a lot about how that process goes best. And it's usually by entering their culture and their norms and what has meaning to them, rather than put on some DSM-5 related psychiatric overlay and say, hey, this is what really going on. That does not work. So.
Yeah, really well said. I feel like there's a lot of people that could learn from that approach as well. And just as I'm hearing you talk, I mean, it sounds like you're going into those conversations with the purpose of really building community and without judgment. Also, it's almost as if you're saying, I want to hear your story and how you got to this place. Not I'm going to diagnose you, I'm going to tell you to change this, I'm going to give you this medication off the bat, but to really hear where people are coming from. I think that's so healthy and so important. And then even as we think about, you talked about the marijuana use and things like that, as we think about kind of the global shift that's happened across the country and across the world in that regard, how does that enter into some of those conversations for you as well? I mean, I can already hear that you're going in again without this spirit of judgment, so to speak, but what are some of the perspectives that you see amongst young people around marijuana use, and how do you also bring information into those places without, again, trying to just be overly prescriptive or say, this is right, this is wrong, you need to do this, you need to do that? How do you, and that's not a well-formulated question, but I think it's also a complicated, nuanced area. So I'm just curious how you navigate some of those pieces around marijuana use or even other substances as well.
Yeah, I would say, the first thing that I realize is I'm already fighting the battle, almost a David against the Goliaths, because right now, the marijuana industry is just so well funded. Every state even has the motivation to sell it as well. So the government's kind of helping those sales along as well. And yet we're using all these, we're doing all these experiments. I mean, not me, but any state that has medical marijuana, it's going to filter down to the teenagers, even though it's not legal for them to have it. They just hear, oh, it's safe for adults. It must be a medicine for everyone. And so most of my teenagers start out with that premise that marijuana is actually very safe and it's medical. And why aren't you guys giving it to me to treat this? So as you can see, we have a lot of barriers and layers to break down in that. So, I mean, the way our staff does it, we have a lot of cultural approaches, but my main one is to really give them that understanding that I know that they're using marijuana more than just to get high. I'm like, well, what else do you like about it? How does it help you? And they often will have very useful ways that they say, helps me focus at school, keeps my mind off of things. I can actually eat. So once they know that you're not just there to yell at them and tell them to stop weed, they open up. And then you can start the next stage of change, which is asking them, what do they not like about the weed? Is there anything that they don't like that's causing some troubles? Usually for a teenager, it's not for themselves. Most of their troubles is, oh, my girlfriend doesn't like that I'm using it. My mom's doesn't mind it, but she doesn't like that I'm in trouble with the law. So we just take wherever they're at there. And then usually 4 or 5 sessions in with me, I can start to pour in some with some science. And they might listen to me like, it kind of grabs their attention when I can show them a few papers that before age 18, heavy marijuana use can actually lower your IQ. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And we have good data now to show that also marijuana affects the developing fetus brain a lot more than other drugs. It's one of the more dangerous ones. So just look at a cannabinoid 1 and 2 receptor map of 2 or 3 month old human brain. You're going to see those receptors are all over the place in that early developmental stage. So we pour in science where they're ready to hear it.
Yeah, that's really well said. And again, I think it's that balance that you have of building that rapport, being a listener, but then also being able to share and then having folks receive what you're sharing as well. I think that's really, really powerful and really, really informative. And we definitely need more of that. Chyrell, any parallels that you can see in the work that you do?
I will only say that working with I work with adults. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Dr. Glaser, just in terms of working with teenagers, because we are then talking about, what's legal versus not legal, and making decisions as an adult are very different,
Right.
very different situations. So I will say that we certainly are using the words we're not supposed to use, like harm reduction, and working with the churches to really think about how can we reach people. So our program, the Amani Breakthrough Opioid Recovery Program, is open to people who are currently using opioid and oids and other substances, and we want people to enter the church who are using, right? So the spaces are open to accept people to come in as they are, very similar in that way, that we're not saying that you have to stop using or to lie and say you're not using. That, if you can't be honest with yourself at the very beginning as you're on this recovery journey, then we've already lost that battle with trying to help you on this journey. And that's what I appreciate about what Dr. Glaser was just saying, just in terms of, if you need to have these honest conversations with people so that they can show up and not pretend. Right, because it's the pretending that's leading to us finding people alone in hotels dying from overdoses. Right, because there's no one there that they can use with to help them in case they need Narcan and those kind of things. So we need to encourage people to talk and be honest about these experiences.
Yeah, it seems so important. Would both of you say that's a shift from how things are typically done? I'm just thinking about maybe what the perception is in the general public. If they're going to see a psychiatrist or psychologist or social worker, I mean, my intuition is that people don't think someone is going to be accepting of anything that they're doing, that they're just going to be told, you're wrong, why are you doing this, why are you doing that? Has that been your sense? Has this caught people off guard in a sense that there is this come as you are, be honest, or have people come to expect that at this point?
I think, culturally speaking and working with Black and Latino communities, that definitely is an expectation that you're not able to show up and be honest, particularly related to any type of self-medicating that you're doing, right? And I'm talking even for tobacco. I quit smoking probably about 5 years ago now, and I certainly was not showing up telling my physician, at my yearly physicals. I mean, I might mention that I was smoking, but I wasn't saying how much, right? So if you're not able to have the honest conversation, how can someone really help and guide you toward to think about what this really means for you, right? And so I think also that when we're thinking about substance use and uh, and unfortunately, some of the people that, as they are on these journeys, are interacting with other systems, right? That where mandatory reporting exists. So as you are walking into your hospital or your physician, and you're saying that you use and having that show up in your records, it's not something that people, want on their records. So it creates this system where people can't be honest. Right.
Yeah. Again, I think that's why it's so transformative what both of you are doing to kind of break that down, even though it might be on individual to individual level or in specific programs. But I think it goes so far. Dr. Glaser, how have you seen the responses change in the youth, if they have at all, because you've been doing this for a number of years? I guess I should ask the question, have you seen changes in how people have been receptive to the approaches that you and your team are using?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, the teenagers have been pretty accepting of that technique. I think where we get in trouble is with some parents. Once the parents find out we're not just yelling at them to stop using weed and all drugs, and develop character, they're just weak in their character, whatever, their biases, that, every now and then we will get yelled at or fired by the parents. So I think that's happening less and less as the field that develops. But I think part of that too has been with medical and recreational weed being approved. Perhaps the parents don't fight back quite as much. But I see the full range of different opinions on that. And even when I just go ahead to do straightforward pediatrics, I notice some of my families want me to be very paternalistic, is the old word about it, where you are telling them what to do, you make the decisions. But most families want it to be a partnership now between you, their knowledge, and unfortunately their Google search, which just as a FYI, Google searches of medical stuff will put out a lot of scary stuff, especially side effects for medicines. It'll only make you more scared about that medicine. So make sure you have a trusted doctor or nurse practitioner to talk over your search with.
Yes. So. Very well said. Very well said. That has come up multiple times in different conversations. So I'm glad you're reiterating. I think one of our guests, a hip hop artist, one of our friends said, "Do not use Google MD. It's not your friend." I mean, you can get additional resources, but yeah, I think that's really well said. Yeah. And you've both alluded quite a few times to community as well. And I know that's in the title of this episode. So how does that play a role? Because even as I'm hearing you talk, it seems that can go one of two ways. It can be helpful. It can be, I shouldn't say a distraction, but it can sometimes disrupt the work that you're trying to do. So Dr. Bellamy, maybe we'll start with you because that's such a big part of the work that you do. How does community get integrated with all the things that you're trying to do on a day-to-day basis?
So first of all, I think it's vital in my work to co-design, to work with community right from the beginning, right? So, and when we don't do that, then there are going to be challenges, right? So, I think it's really key that as we really think about when we're working with community, to think about how to do that respectfully in terms of how we enter and exit communities. We do a lot of research with communities in Yale. And then, unfortunately, grants end and research projects end. And these projects often, sometimes they're making, very beneficial to the communities. And so we leave them without the ability to sustain the work. So that's a never good feeling. We also don't go back into those communities and talk about the research, talk about what worked, what went well, what could be done different, future research in this area, talk about the other challenges of doing research in community settings. So I think that if we are going to really want to engage community, that it's important to do that together with them. And yes, you're not going to be able to reach every community member, right? So I've done projects where people still feel left out. And that will be the case, that there's always going to be someone that feels left out. But it's our duty to attempt to do as many community conversations, to get people on your projects talking to community members, just so that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that people understand what it is that we're doing in terms of research as well as practice.
Yeah. What do some of those conversations look like? Because I know at times members of the community will feel like, oh, I'm just being used in this instance. This isn't actually going to help me. This is just so someone can do their work and have it on their CV. What types of things do you actually draw out in those conversations to help build that rapport and to have that co-designing?
Yeah. Well, part of it is making sure that they can also then put it on their CV, right?
Yeah.
So we don't give them certificates for being involved in the development of, research, right? So we were talking about this yesterday in my role now at the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation. I'm working with the cultural ambassadors, and the cultural ambassadors in the past have not received certificates for the work, for their training, right? So it's important that we're training people to do research, to be community workers, that we provide certificates so that they can be recognized. That is one way to value their experience. I think also it is the valuing and the recognition of their experience. Our churches, our pulpits are filled with people who are brilliant, right? Who can run interventions, right? So acknowledging the strengths that are there, really coming from that sort of appreciative inquiry perspective of taking the good that's in community and not stepping in just to see what's bad. I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, by way of Brooksville, Little River, South Carolina. And so whenever we would always see what was negative happening about our community in the newspaper, and rarely do you see the good things that's happening, right? So it's important that we're able to point out some of those good things and keep them highlighted. And highlight again and recognize the people that are there.
Yeah, that's so important. That's really encouraging to hear as well. Are there any times, in addition to these positive aspects, where you've actually changed what you've done, or any scenarios that come to mind based on the input from the community that's actually improved the work for the better?
Oh, yes. I could think of so many different ways. So one example is with our Imani Breakthrough Project. Initially, it was only going to be a 12-week intervention. It was the pastors and the facilitators from the church and our church liaison, Reverend Robin Anderson, who said, "This is not enough." It's like you've just given them a taste of something, and now we have to just send them away. Like, we need Imani next steps. So the intervention went from 12 weeks to 22 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And at first, when we were designing it, we were like, 22 weeks, people are not going to stick around. They're not going to want to stay for that. But the church was like, no, we need more time. We're just getting started. You're saying, come as you are. It's okay that you use. But, what happens is people are decreasing their use when they're needing more of that support. I'm thinking about, your student, Violet Kimball's work with the mice, looking at, socialization and what's happening as, cocaine is withdrawn, and seeing that socialization is so key to people's lives, right? So now we understand, or she's doing great work around understanding some of the biological effects of socialization. But we also just know from research around social support and socialization that when that's pulled away, that people feel empty, right? So even I will say that with our nearly 6-month intervention in the last 5 years now, we have lost 3 people within 10 days following the intervention. 3 people, that's too many, right? So now our goal has always been, we have that 22-week intervention, but how can we sustain the work in churches so that they can continue to be connected with these individuals on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, that's really powerful. Sobering and important in a lot of ways too, but encouraging that you're listening so much to the feedback, because that's going to meet people where they are and actually be more effective, rather than, not that you would, but getting stuck in your pre-prescribed mode, even though it was with good intentions.
Yeah.
But just hearing and actually being able to integrate that. Yeah. So really appreciate that. Dr. Glaser, what about you? How does community show up? You've mentioned a few things already, but I'm wondering how that just impacts the day-to-day, and how you're in partnership with community, or any times that strife might come up as well.
Sure. I think the Washington University model, 50 to 100 years ago was not a very good one. It was take the poorest regions of St. Louis, and that's where the young training doctors and nurses will go to train, and they may get substandard care, and they may get put into research studies without very good informed consent. So a lot of mistakes were made. If you ever do want to see a good documentary about that, the Pruitt-Igoe documentaries from St. Louis highlight a lot of those trying to improve the poor areas and low socioeconomic areas with the wrong ideas. So over the last 20 to 40 years, the Public School of Health has helped the rest of WashU really integrate better community skills and better community interventions. How does that come out, at least in the psychiatry department and with some of the substance use treatment that I do? Well, for example, we have a really large study looking at perinatal depression. So treating both the mother and the child with, interventions to help their depression and help their early development. And this was done through a large grant. Dr. Rogers integrated with Harriet Stowe College so that we would involve, people of all diversity into this study and into the training of it. We have a poverty study as well that brought extra services into their elementary schools. Dr. Luby runs those. And then the way Children's Hospital did it for my job was one of the administrators had lost a son to an overdose of drugs. And so she donated a large amount of money and said, I don't want this clinic to be in WashU. I want it to be in the community where they're already receiving rehab services. So that's where I went, and we took, the best of modern harm reduction, substance use. And over, several years, I learned how to integrate it into a rehab model, which was totally different, but totally run by community services, and therefore a much better place for it. So the integration there is you have a lot of community-based workers, a lot of like big brothers who are already working in the system to take them after they've been through rehab and pour into their lives so they can get through high school and get to their first job and everything. And then a lot of integrative care with other services like art therapy that maybe art therapy involves working in a kind of a modern rap studio with Fruity Loops to make your beats. And then they have them write their story of their life and make a rap song out of it. And that's a much better therapy technique than using some traditional, sit down on the couch and tell me about your mother. That's not going to work. We even did very intricate things such as plan where we put the rehab units in kind of neutral zones so that not one gang or another could claim it. And therefore, teenagers of, opposite gangs can actually be in rehab and be at peace and can learn to love each other and realize that they're people as well.
Wow.
So and none of that would have happened at all. And this was done by the people in the community or into their own community first.
Yeah.
And about the only trouble, like Dr. Chyrell mentioned earlier, was that the turnover rate can be pretty brutal. And sometimes they come on and they're really well prepared, but they smell like weed when they come in. Well, that's a problem if you're smelling like weed and the teenagers are in a place where they're not allowed to use it. So, but I'd rather have those unique problems than just try to make it from some research concept of how this was all supposed to go.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Reaction from you, Chyrell?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I think that what's equally important in this work is that we understand that there's so many people who are even delivering the services that need support. There's a lot of work that we need to do there. So.
Yeah, that can't be ignored. Can't be ignored at all. It's amazing to me the parallels between the work that you all are doing. I mean, one thing that is just standing out is just how much we have to learn from our communities. I say we as academic institutions, universities. I mean, in both the things that you've all mentioned, if things stayed in the way that universities wanted them to stay, there would be a huge lack, both in St. Louis, here in New Haven. And so just having that openness to learn from those and then to integrate it and then really have it be a partnership, I think is really important. Even Dr. Glaser, as you mentioned, it sounds like, so much intentionality, even where the clinic is, to really think about all those pieces that will make an impact. And I think hopefully that's not the case as much anymore, but too many times in the past, if those things haven't been thought about and the outcome doesn't go well, it's too easy for people to say, oh, look, we tried this in the community, it didn't work. Well, did you actually do it in a way that was informed by what the community needed or by what you thought the community needed? So again, just really appreciate what you both are doing. Maybe a bit of a provocative question for both of you. How can this work be expanded to touch more communities in the country and different places? Because this is what you are both describing is not uniform across the country. There are a lot of places where this is not the case. So any ideas and maybe things that you all have even done to try and expand this to other places as well? Maybe Dr. Bellamy, we'll start with you.
Again, it's first of all, I think good work speaks for itself. However, if you're not out there trying to really push what's working well with your programs and really, being a champion for that work, and people don't pick up on it, right? So the work of the Imani Breakthrough, first of all, we speak about it every chance that we get. We encourage our pastors, our facilitators, our individuals who graduate from Imani to serve as ambassadors of the program themselves, because they're the best at getting other people involved in the program. So Imani is now first of all, Imani means faith in Swahili, but Imani is now in 15 churches, with 3 of those churches being in Rhode Island and 3 in New Orleans. So we have and they were starting another church in Massachusetts.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we just signed off on some paperwork to get that started. Really excited about doing work there as well. And our goal really is to try to scale up. We're finishing our UO1 NIH grant now. And the hope is, as we're analyzing the data and writing up the next grant, to really think about how can we further study the elements of the Imani Breakthrough program and see it around the world, right? So, and actually, speaking of that, we have a visiting scholar, Tarcísia Castro from Bahia, Brazil, with us right now. And she is sort of trying to figure out how to replicate Imani to take back to Bahia. So,
yeah, really encouraging. That's great. Dr. Glaser, what about you? Any thoughts for ways to expand the approaches that you've been using, or ways you've seen that already expand? I know you do a lot of research as well and other things.
Yeah, I would say having a diversified approach is very important. If your state doesn't have it, I would look at Missouri and other models where they institute a sales tax to support the teen rehab alone, because insurance won't pay for much more than a few days of rehab. And this sales tax allows us to keep the teens in rehab for 2 to 3 months. The other one is decriminalizing drug use charges for teenagers. And instead of just putting them into juvenile or prison with very little recovery or rehab services, getting them put into these rehab places has been much more fruitful.
Yeah.
So that's more on the public policy side.
Right.
On the research side, I think WashU's gained more ground from private grants and private funding, but we still do try to get as much NIH funding. NIH is still always the trickiest, though, because they always have their own agenda, and you just have to hope that your agenda is on their agenda, get it done.
Yeah.
So these private grants have really freed up WashU to do a lot of more community-based things. And I think the only other approach that we use in St. Louis is there's Teen Challenge, which is a kind of a faith-based rehab. And that's, WashU cannot fund that directly because it doesn't really prescribe to any one faith. It wants to treat people of all kinds. But I guess the flip side of that is don't really expect medical care to fix this anytime soon, because it is right now medical care is very profit driven and not very concerned about the procedureless fields of pediatrics and psychiatry where they'd rather put more of their money into having good surgeons that can charge a lot of money. But having a teenager rehab 3 to 4 times to prevent them from becoming an adult addict, they could care about less about spending that money. Even if we show them data show how important it is to make that person a non-drug using adult, gives so much more to society and productivity of the world, as well as self-esteem. That doesn't really, if it's not a appendectomy they can charge for, they really don't care. So you have to diversify and use all these other techniques to try to attack it.
Yeah. So still work to be done, but I appreciate how you all have been strategic about that as well. And just so the words of wisdom that you're sharing for our listeners as well.
It's vital. I mean, when we're looking at those, it's sometimes very hard for me to work with teenagers, because I just want to reach in, hug them, and try to get them to stop, because I'm seeing it on the other end with the adults. And, we have a large population of folks, in our sample, 70% of folks have a history of, involvement with the criminal justice system, right? So we also have a good 60 to 70% that have histories of trauma. Childhood, sexual abuse, those kind of things that we're not addressing as, when we should. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing and have done, and we need more of that, because if not, we're definitely going to continue to see that problem in the people that I'm working with as adults. And unfortunately, we still have not done a really good job at, in Connecticut, like for instance, we have the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. So we try to integrate both mental health and addiction services. We still have so far to go there. Even if you think about funding mechanisms from SAMHSA are still targeting either substance use or mental health, right? So occasionally you might see something for co-occurring. But I don't even think it's an issue around co-occurring. I think it's the issues that you should be able to treat both, right? Because by ignoring, substance use, then you're not really dealing with the reality that, many people that are experiencing mental health challenges are dealing with, substances in some way. If it's not a concern yet, it could be, one day, because we haven't addressed it.
So much that needs to be done. And this is something not to be tangential, but we've talked about a lot in my lab as well. Just trying to look at co-occurring and not try and put, sometimes as researchers, we too neatly try and divide things. Sometimes there's a necessity there to try and understand what's happening underneath, whether it's substance use or depression or anxiety. But again, it's just not the reality of what people are experiencing. So
Right. And then you also think about, some of the challenges. I was thinking about this around research now, particularly related to what people are using in the community. Everything is so tainted right now. So if you're not getting it from a dispensary or, which you can't, often, you are putting yourself at risk. It's not pure cocaine, it's not pure heroin, so it's those are the things that people are dying from.
Well, lots more to be done. Hopefully, as the listeners are tuned in as well, for those of you who are maybe engaged in research, those of you who are thinking about getting into research or any aspect of mental health services, this can give you some insights too about these areas that still need to be addressed, even with all the great work that both our guests are doing. So I feel like there's more we could talk about, but as we wrap up on the hour, I do want to ask both of you, what gives you hope in your day-to-day? Because there's both, as you mentioned, Chyrell, at the beginning, both the challenges and some of the things that keep you going. But Dr. Glaser, maybe we'll start with you this time. What gives you hope in your day-to-day?
Sure. What gives me hope is that I just spend a lot of time teaching as well. And all the people that I am teaching are very concerned about these ideas and these problems, and they have solutions that they're working on. So I think the hope is in the next generation. And then, I think for me, the other part of hope comes from higher power, where it's beyond understanding. Otherwise, if you just look at what you have in front of you, it is easy to give up hope.
Mm.
So that's where we got to look for a different source and for a greater purpose beyond just what we're doing in the face value of things.
Yeah, really well said. Dr. Bellamy, what about you?
Yeah, definitely. I would say faith, definitely, and holding on to that. I speak to my mother quite often, and one of the things that she says that really sustains me is that worry and prayer don't go together, right? So it's really important that I hold on to the belief that things can get better. And I will say very similarly, it's these young folks or early career researchers as well as providers that I'm hearing from, that I'm talking to, that just keep me excited about, the future possibilities for the world, right? Because they're able to at least hold on to some of that hope. We're able to be there to help them so that they're not reinventing the wheel, right? So, but also just really hoping for a better future. And I think that's really key to the work that we're doing. I will also say that the community, and us really relying on the community, that they, particularly with our collaboration, have the resources or can have the resources to do a lot of this work so that we're not alone. This fight, we cannot do this by ourselves. We really do need community, and we need to get better at collaborating and sharing resources with communities so that they can do this work.
Yeah, really well said. Well, both of you all give me hope just in who you are and the work that you're doing. I also appreciate you all being here today. Thanks to you for all the, this is years of wisdom and knowledge and practice that you all share with listeners. I hope the listeners have appreciated this as well. I hope you all can tap into this, maybe listen to it a few times just because there's so many different wise words and nuggets that were dropped here today. But definitely appreciate both of you being here on the Addy Hour podcast, this first recording of 2026, with many more good conversations to come. So thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.